The modern world order, with its intricate web of economic ties, is deeply rooted in the history of colonialism. European powers, in their quest for resources and dominance, redrew the map of the world, imposing their systems of governance and economic models on vast swathes of Asia, Africa and the Americas. This legacy of colonialism continues to cast a long shadow on the economic realities of many nations, particularly in Africa. Colonial powers were primarily interested in extracting resources and wealth from their colonies. This often meant developing infrastructure and economic systems that served the needs of the colonizer, not the colonized. The result was the creation of economies heavily reliant on exporting raw materials and importing finished goods, a pattern that persisted even after independence. This enforced dependence created a system where the economic fate of colonies was intricately tied to the whims of their European rulers. This legacy of dependence laid the groundwork for the challenges faced by post-colonial states as they navigated the turbulent waters of the global economy. The historical context of colonialism is essential for understanding the complex relationship between former colonies and institutions like the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank. These institutions, though created with the stated aim of fostering global economic stability, often operate within the framework of neo-colonialism, perpetuating the cycle of dependence established during the colonial era. The end of World War II marked a turning point in global history. As the dust settled, a new world order began to take shape, one characterized by the rise of international institutions designed to prevent future conflicts and foster global cooperation. Among these were the IMF and the World Bank, created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. These institutions, initially conceived to assist war-torn European economies, soon expanded their reach, becoming key players in the economic development of newly independent nations in Africa, Asia and Latin America. With their vast financial resources and technical expertise, the IMF and World Bank presented themselves as partners in progress, offering loans and guidance to countries struggling to establish their economic footing. However, the assistance provided by these institutions came with strings attached. Borrowing countries were often required to implement specific economic policies, known as structural adjustment programs, as a condition for receiving loans. These policies typically emphasized free market principles, including trade liberalization, privatization of state-owned enterprises, and deregulation of financial markets. While proponents argued that these measures would promote economic growth and efficiency, critics contended that they often exacerbated existing inequalities, undermined local industries, and increased dependence on foreign capital. This marked the beginning of a complex and often contentious relationship between the IMF and World Bank and the developing world. On the surface, the IMF and World Bank boast a diverse membership, with countries from every corner of the globe participating in their decision-making processes. This apparent inclusivity, however, masks a deeper power imbalance that undermines the agency of developing countries, particularly those in Africa. Voting power within these institutions is determined by a country's economic weight, measured by factors such as GDP and financial contributions. This system grants disproportionate influence to wealthy nations, primarily from North America and Europe, while marginalizing the voices of developing countries. As a result, the policies and programs of the IMF and World Bank often reflect the interests of their most powerful members, even when these policies run counter to the needs and priorities of developing nations. This imbalance of power creates a situation where developing countries, despite being members of these institutions, often find themselves on the receiving end of decisions made elsewhere, with little recourse to challenge or influence them. The illusion of membership serves to legitimize the actions of the IMF and World Bank, giving the impression of a democratic and participatory process. However, the reality is far more complex, with power dynamics often mirroring the colonial structures they were meant to transcend. One of the most significant criticisms leveled against the IMF and World Bank is their role in perpetuating a cycle of debt and dependence in the developing world. The loans provided by these institutions, while often presented as a lifeline for struggling economies, can quickly become a millstone around the necks of borrowing countries, leading to a vicious cycle of debt accumulation and austerity measures. The conditions attached to IMF and World Bank loans, often referred to as structural adjustment programs, frequently exacerbate the economic challenges faced by developing nations. These programs typically require governments to cut public spending, privatize state-owned enterprises, and devalue their currencies. While these measures are intended to stabilize economies and make them more attractive to foreign investment, they often lead to job losses, reduced access to essential services like healthcare and education, and increased poverty. As a result, countries find themselves trapped in a cycle of borrowing to repay existing debts, with little room for investing in long-term development or addressing the root causes of their economic woes. This cycle of debt and dependence undermines the ability of developing countries to chart their own economic course, effectively shackling them to the dictates of international financial institutions. The debt trap is a complex issue with far-reaching consequences, impacting not only economic growth, but also social stability and political sovereignty. It is a stark reminder of the enduring legacy of colonialism and the challenges faced by developing countries in asserting their economic independence.